The end of a marriage can feel like you're lost, right? Like you're trying to navigate without a map. Well, the good news is, in New Zealand, there is a map. There are very specific rules for legally ending a marriage, and we're going to walk you through that roadmap, step by step. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where you're going.
So, if you're thinking about what's commonly called divorce in New Zealand, here's the first thing you need to know. We don't actually call it that here.
The official term is dissolution. It might sound like a small detail, but getting the language right is just the start. Knowing the actual process, well, that's what makes all the difference. So let's break it all down for you in the next few minutes.
All right, first things first, we absolutely have to clear something up. The difference between separation and dissolution. I hear people use these words interchangeably all the time, but legally, they are worlds apart.
So, separation. It's pretty much what it sounds like, right? It's the practical end of living together as a couple. But here's what might surprise you. You don't need a court, you don't need paperwork, you don't even need your partner to agree to it. And get this, you can technically be separated while still living under the same roof, as long as you're genuinely living separate lives. It's an informal step, but trust me, it has some major legal implications down the line.
So if you're trying to remember the difference, here it is in a nutshell. Separation means you're living apart, but guess what? You're still legally married. Dissolution, that's the formal court order that officially ends the marriage, and it's the only thing that makes you legally free to go out and get married again.
Okay, let's move on. And I really want you to pay close attention here because we're about to talk about the single most important part of this entire process. Seriously, if you only remember one thing from all of this, make it this next point.
2 years. That's the magic number. It's the mandatory amount of time you have to be separated before you can even think about applying for a dissolution. Why? Well, it's because New Zealand has what's called a no-fault system. The court literally doesn't care who was right or wrong or who did what. That 2-year separation period is all the proof they need to say, okay, this relationship has officially broken down.
And let me be clear, this rule is super strict. It doesn't matter if you and your ex are on the best of terms and you both just want to get it over with. You simply cannot shorten that time. The 2-year clock has to tick all the way down. However, there is one very, very important exception to this rule.
It's a recent change in the law, and it's known as Ashley's Law, and it's an absolutely vital protection. Basically, if someone is a victim of domestic violence and has a final protection order against their partner, they do not have to wait 2 years. They can apply for a dissolution immediately. This is a huge deal because it gets rid of that horrible barrier that used to trap people in a legal marriage with their abuser.
Okay, so let's say your 2 years are up, or that important exception applies to your situation. What's next? How do you actually get the ball rolling? Well, there are basically 2 different paths you can take to file with the court.
And really, which path you choose all boils down to one simple word: cooperation. Can you work together or not? If you can do a joint application. It's faster, it's way simpler, and the whole thing can be wrapped up in about a month. But if you have to go it alone, that's a single application, and that gets more complex. You have to formally serve papers to your ex-partner, wait for them to respond. The choice you make here is going to have a huge impact on your timeline and, honestly, your stress level.
But no matter which way you go, joint or single, the basic paperwork is pretty much the same for everybody. It's a straightforward 4-step dance. You get the forms online, you fill out something called an affidavit, which is just a sworn statement, you dig up your marriage certificate, and then you file it all with the court and pay the fee. See? It's just a process, one step after another.
Okay, let's get to the big questions, the ones everyone always asks. How much is this going to cost me, and how long is this whole thing going to take?
All right, let's talk money. There's one cost that's the same for everyone, and it's set in stone. That's the court filing fee. Right now, it's $242. That's what you pay just to get your application in the door. It's non-negotiable. But, and this is a big but, that is just the starting line.
Because this is where the real cost comes in. It's not the court fee, it's the lawyer fees. And those fees are fueled by one single thing: conflict. Look, if everything is simple and you both agree on everything, you're on the low end of the scale. But the second you start fighting over the house, the kids, anything, that's when the costs can just explode. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, easily. Honestly, cooperation is probably the most powerful financial tool you have in this whole process. And you know what? The timeline works pretty much the same way. Remember, this is after your 2-year separation is already done. If you file jointly and everything's agreed upon, boom, you can be done in a month. If you file alone but it's still uncontested, maybe 2 to 4 months.
But if things get messy and contested, you're looking at 6 months minimum. And honestly, it could be a whole lot longer.
So all this might have you thinking, okay, if I've already done the hard part of separating and we've sorted our lives out, why do I even need to bother with the formal court stuff? And that's a really common question. The answer, in a word, is certainty. Legal certainty. Let's start with the most obvious reason. It all comes down to one simple question.
Do you ever want to get married again? Because it's really as simple as this. You are not legally allowed to marry someone else until you have that final dissolution order in your hand. It doesn't matter if you've been separated for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Without that official piece of paper, in the eyes of the law, you're still married.
But it's not just about getting remarried. Finalizing everything gives you critical legal and financial closure. For example, things like spousal maintenance, financial support. The rules for that get much stricter and clearer after dissolution. And here's a big one, inheritance. Once you're formally divorced, you lose those automatic spousal inheritance rights. It just creates a clean, official break that protects both of you from all sorts of messy complications down the road.
So there you have it. We've gone through the whole legal roadmap, from that first step of separation all the way to final dissolution. And we've seen again and again how your time, your money, and your stress levels all come down to agreement and clarity. Which kind of leaves us with one last really important question, doesn't it? Could sorting out a formal separation agreement right at the very beginning be the single best thing you do to make this whole process go smoothly? You know, based on everything we've covered, that really does seem to be the key to taking control of the journey ahead.